All right, everyone. So the other day I talked a little bit about my experience in season 1 so far, and I want to give you the full kind of breakdown of how much I'm enjoying it. What are some things that I think are great? What are some things that I think are kind of sad or not fun, I guess is a better way to put it. Now, this is in no way to tell you you should or should not play season 1 if you're having fun. Okay, if you're having fun, play it. If you're not, don't play it, I guess. That's basically what it boils down to. But this is mainly for those people that are like, I might be in the early game, you know, maybe it doesn't get better in the later runs. Am I missing out on anything new? What's different from preseason to season 1, etc. This is kind of like a review of season 1 so far, as of being like 30 or so hours into the game, maybe a little bit less than that. As you can see, I'm level 80, which isn't like the highest in the game by any means, but it does mean that I've invested a lot of time into the game so far, especially compared to a lot of other people out there. So let's talk about that and just showcase kind of what I've been through so far. Have I only leveled? No. In fact, I've actually done the entire seasonal quest line except for the final quest. And this is actually something that I think is not necessarily good with season 1 right now. Because you don't actually want to finish the seasonal quest. It's a really, really good farm at the last quest of, or some of the last quests of the seasonal quest line. And if you see my previous video, then you would know that. But I finished that. I've also gone ahead and progressed through the seasonal journey up to chapter 4 so far. I have not specifically gone out of my way to do this, but then there's also a bunch of other things that I've done, like I've done a little bit of renown grinding, as you can see here. I've not finished the whole thing because it's not exactly my most favorite thing to do. And then after that, I've gone ahead and been farming nightmare dungeons, which I think the highest one I've done so far is like 46. I haven't really pushed it. I've just kind of done the ones that I've seen. So about 46 is kind of where I'm at. And then of course, I guess you could say, biggest thing with season 1 is hearts. And I have collected quite a few hearts. This doesn't actually reflect how many I've collected, because I've gone through and salvaged a ton of them, but you actually get a ton of them from the farm from the quest line. So it's kind of what I've experienced so far. Let's talk about the leveling process first off, because this is going to be what most people experience for the first arguably month to month and a half of the game. And I'm not even considering going all the way up to level 100. I'm talking about like going to like 70 or 75 or 80. That is what people are going to be doing for the first month and a half. And I'll say this. The standard leveling process for your average casual player is actually better than it was in preseason. You might ask why, what, how? Well, one of the big things that they've done when you start out is that every area of the map is actually level 1. And so you can actually choose what you want to do. Now, this could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. But for me, I actually found this to be a good thing, especially if you're coming from preseason. What this means is, if you had a specific spot that you like to farm, or if you had a specific method that you like to do, well, you can immediately do it at level 1. Whereas before, for example, blind burrows started at level 35. And so when I did my season 1 leveling guide before season 1 came out, I mentioned we're not going to be doing blind burrows because it's level 35. You can't do that at like level 17, or at least it's going to be very difficult. However, in my updated season 1 leveling guide, I mentioned I did blind burrows because it was level 1 at the start of the game. So that's what I did. Level 1, I immediately did a couple of different things, like to get my level up just like to level 7 or 8. And then I immediately ran into blind burrows. And then I went ahead and got my aspect. Pretty cool. That makes the early leveling process a lot more versatile and a lot more enjoyable, in my opinion. But I will say, overall, from the 1 to 50 process, which is the early leveling process, one thing remains clear, and that is you do feel weaker, especially if you're coming from preseason and if you're someone that has played the same class. If you're playing a different class, you might not feel it as much, but in my opinion, you still do feel it. For example, I played Rogue the most in season 1 or season 0, and starting out with season 1 on the Rogue, I can noticeably tell certain things in the game, like jumping to world tier 2, or perhaps trying to jump into nightmare dungeons later on, at every point in the game. But especially in the early leveling process, I felt a lot weaker, and that was a little bit less fun. So that's something that you have to consider. However, along with the early leveling process, there's also the kind of seasonal 1 quest line that you might want to pick up. and tend to be something that a lot of people do. And this actually provides a little bit of breakup in terms of like what content you might want to farm for specific levels, which is actually a really, really nice thing. These malignant tunnels are actually basically just regular dungeons with the chance to drop, you know, the hearts at a higher rate, because you can actually drop hearts in other areas of the game. The only specific thing in this dungeon that's, I guess you say, different is the ending of it, where you can actually specifically target farm hearts with the invokers. To me, these are kind of cool. They're not anything special. They're just the new dungeons. Essentially, they're just new dungeons. And I haven't really farmed much of them because I haven't needed to due to a specific farming method with the seasonal quest line. And so, well, they're kind of just sitting around and not really doing much. However, the hearts that you actually acquire from these, even in the early game, are actually really, really good. So I do recommend actually finishing the initial Season 1 quest and then going ahead and kind of progressing through your normal progression, as long as you don't care about specifically leveling quickly. Because these hearts, the only thing that scales throughout the game is actually the armor aspect, and then some of them are locked behind World Tier 3 and World Tier 4. But the actual effects of them, for example, this Revenge one, the Brutal Heart here, is going to give us 20% potential incoming damage suppressed. You could get that at level 1, which means that you actually have some really serious progression increases at level 1 to 50, which actually feels really good, and again reinforces this idea of leveling 1 to 50 actually feels pretty nice. You actually get some pretty powerful increases. But then we move on to like World Tier 3 and World Tier 4, and I'm going to lump these together because they're kind of the same. The progression is very, very similar to what we've experienced before. You know, you get your sacred items, you immediately get a big jump of increasing power, and then you kind of just teeters off and plateau, and then you get to World Tier 4, and then the same thing happens. Big increase, plateau, and then you kind of enter into the end game grind. Is anything different from the Season 0? No. It is basically the same thing. The only differences you could say are Nightmare Dungeons. There's a different rotation. And, well, they've buffed the Tree of Whispers. So if you want to do that in World Tier 3 or World Tier 4, well, it's increased now. But it's still not as good as Nightmare Dungeons. In reality, the game is basically the same. In fact, I would wager to say that if you were to play Season 0 and Season 1, and let's say you never saw any hearts in the game, you would be like, what changed? Because nothing did change. And that's kind of a big, I guess you say, deterrent for a lot of people, which is that if you played Season 0, you've basically experienced all of what Diablo 4 has to offer, as long as you've gotten to like World Tier 4. And arguably, even if you've gotten to World Tier 3, you've experienced all of what Diablo 4 has to offer, which is kind of a downside to it. And to me, I think is a little bit less fun than I was hoping for. Okay. So expect nothing to be different. Again, the only thing that really changed is the hearts, and you could even access most of these. In fact, potentially all of what you want in your build as early as World Tier 1, which is pretty insane. Some builds require or want other different hearts, and so you might have to wait to World Tier 4. And in fact, some of them, for example, the one I have in my stash here, can actually be pretty fun and build defining on World Tier 4. I'll show you this one here. This one for the Rogue has a chance to apply all imbuement effects, which is really, really exciting for some fun and crazy Rogue build shenanigans, but this is actually only found in World Tier 4. So if you want to get to World Tier 4, then you might access some additional builds that are build defining for your class. Some are better than others. This one arguably is not a great one, it's just more of a fun one. So that's pretty cool. But there's nothing else, right? And that's what I've been doing for the past, I don't know, 2 days, 3 days, is farming Nightmare Dungeons on repeat. Over and over and over and over again. There's literally nothing else in this game. The only other thing that you could have been doing is potentially Renown, but most people do this earlier on in the season or early on in the leveling process, and this isn't anything really different either, right? I would be doing side dungeons anyways, or I would be doing strongholds anyways. I would be doing the same thing as I was previously. So what can you really expect? Nothing different. And if I could say one word to sum up Season 1, fun, but the same game. Now let's talk about some of the things that I think are a little bit unfun and are kind of, I guess you say, annoying. If these weren't in the game or these were changed, I would just have more fun. And that's something that I think matters to me and a lot of other people. First thing is stash. And I'm not going to bash on this too much because they are adding one stash tab. But realistically, they should have made it so that these hearts are like a separate inventory. Because these hearts are the season 1 mechanic, and all they've managed to do is fill up half a stash. And I've been very picky with the ones I want to save. You might see some other people, and especially if you're a newer player to the game or a newer player to season 1, you might have a full stash full because you're like, I don't know what to save. I don't know what's good. I don't know what's bad. Whereas I've done a ton of research on a lot of these and tested all of them, and I kind of know what I want and which ones I might want for certain builds. And so these should have just been a separate inventory space. Another thing that I really find kind of annoying that I've been doing nightmare dungeons all the time with is the fact that when you mark things as junk in this game, for example, if I were to mark Mercy's Reach as junk and are going to sell all the junk, it actually sells your nightmare sigil, as you can see here. Why? Like, these types of things are like, why does this happen? You know, most people sell their junk. Most people sell, you know, the rare items in this game, and then they end up selling their nightmare sigils. If you're like me and you like to organize your inventory and be like, okay, I want to mark this one as junk because I know it's bad, right? It just instantly sells your nightmare sigils, which is kind of annoying, right? I wish it would just sell specifically whatever I'm choosing in that inventory. Like if I hit sell junk and sell all, it should only sell the equipment in my inventory. And that's just one of the quality of life improvements. For example, on that sell junk point, if I wanted to salvage all my sigils at one time, I have to sell or salvage them all individually. And these are just minor things, right? They're not big things. They all add up. They all add up as I'm going through. Another thing that I really wish I had, especially as I've literally rerolled basically all of my items here, is the ability to actually see the potential reroll ranges and the reroll options, right? This is a very big one, especially when we're all building up our characters again. Before in the preseason, we all mentioned this, but after you've built up your character, you start to use this less and less, assuming you're not like running and going through and trying to min-max every single stat to the maximum roll, or you're not trying other builds. But as you're leveling up, you use this a ton. And I really wish I could just easily see, okay, what are my potential options? What are my max rolls? Even though I have like a build that I built and I could just look at that, I'd rather just look at it in game, you know? This is another thing that I really found to be just kind of annoying at some points. Another thing is the season 1 mechanics themselves. Why are there benches only in specific spots? You know, like if I'm farming a dungeon over here and I teleport back to Ked Bardu, I can't access the season 1 bench. And even more so, why is it separate from like the salvager? Like if I'm gonna go and farm, let's say, a bunch of nightmare dungeons, well, I'm gonna get like, look at this, I farmed a full inventory of nightmare dungeons and I have 4 hearts in my inventory. Well, I'm gonna go teleport back, I sell my items, I salvage, and then I have to run back all the way over here to the bench to salvage them. Why? You know, like just let us salvage at the blacksmith, which would be way better. And on top of that, don't have it only in Kyovashad. It's like having a stash only in certain main cities or in certain cities outside of the main cities. Like, why do we not just have a bench in every main town? Because you don't always farm the same dungeon in Kyovashad. You farm other nightmare dungeons across the map and you end up in different towns. So that every town should have a bench. You know, like just these small things. And I could mention a bunch of them, but it boils down to there's just a bunch of small things that add up and make the whole experience like, I just kind of want to go through and kill some more monsters, but I'm getting stalled through these like small things. And it just makes me have less fun. Even though I'm still having fun, these things just add up over time. So that's kind of my experience of season 1. Basically, again, if I were to boil it down into two sentence summary, same game with slightly different items. And then the second sentence would be the quality of life is not missing, but it's still fun. Or it is missing, but it's still fun. And that's kind of where I'd sum it up. I'm having fun. I'm getting annoyed by a little of the quality of life. I'm having the basically same experience with different items. That's it. You know? there wasn't really any game-changing aspects that I found. I will try to test out some of them, like the Poison Immune basic one for Rogue, but it's nothing special. And that could be a good thing, but it could also be a bad thing. So, you know, if that's something you enjoy, play it. If it's not something you enjoy, don't play it. I'm enjoying it still, so I'm going to keep playing it. And I'll probably be playing it for the next few weeks while I try out all the different classes, because that's what I really want to do. Especially with the added bonuses of not having to, you know, uncover the fog across the map all over again. But let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Are you enjoying Season 1 so far? If you're not, what are the main reasons why? Is it because it's not different? Is it because some of the quality of life is bothering you? Is it because the patch notes weren't as kind of what you wanted to see? Just kind of curious to hear. See you for the next one.